Good morning, everybody, and welcome to One Discovery Place and the SpendTrend 2025 SpendTrend 2025 release. It's always an absolute privilege and a pleasure to welcome you to Discovery, and in particular on behalf of Visa as well. This is the third year in which we're partnering with Visa, and to Lineshri and your team. We're truly grateful for the partnership, and it really is a unique collaboration in every single sense. It allows the kind of the best insights and the deepest kind of insights and analytics from both Visa and Discovery Bank to really be brought together. The combination is quite unique in a sense in that it gives industry-wide analytics, and at the same time, using the kind of granularity of Discovery Bank's data, real client-level behavioral insights at the same time. So you get kind of a macro and micro view of spend trends across the South African population. This year, from a kind of an actuarial perspective, it's particularly exciting. We have both quantitative and qualitative research that's been conducted across the population, and it's given us really rich insights that we'll be sharing with you this morning. This is obviously a kind of a retrospective over the last 12 months, looking at 2024 in detail, but kind of going back and looking at 5 years worth of data prior to that, and it really is framed by five key trends that we see influencing spending behavior over the last 12 months. And obviously, in addition to kind of the geopolitical backdrop, which framed a lot of 2024, where essentially, I think as we all know, over half the world went to the polls and went through elections, and the kind of the massive geopolitical changes that we've seen play out on the back of that. But our focus is very much on consumer behavior and consumer spending trends that are framed against that. And we saw 5 key trends really coming through strongly that frame this year's SpendTrend report. Firstly, the kind of the continued sustained high interest rates that we observed over 2024 really did create real consumer spending pressure and strain on consumers, and we saw it playing out through the calendar year as interest rates started to decline at the end of the year. I think we'll start to see that playing through in 2025, and we'll talk to some of the trends and the outlook at the end. But 2024 was really kind of framed by that sustained high interest rate environment that we observed throughout the year. The second trend that we observed and continue to observe is the kind of the rapid shift at a policy level to real-time digital payments, and the kind of the impact that has at a consumer level. We've seen in South Africa the emergence of PayShap and kind of real-time rails across the South African landscape, which represented 130 million real-time payments over instant payments between consumers, kind of peer-to-peer payments in South Africa last year. The third trend is really kind of almost a return to normal, the post-COVID era coming through in many different areas, and that's manifested over the last couple of years, as we've seen and noted in SpendTrend 22, 23, 24 and 25 is no different in terms of areas like travel, but in particular the return to office, and that's kind of a key trend that we've seen coming through strongly, and it plays through in a number of different areas. The fourth is that with digital banking comes kind of a significant shift in where risk in the payment system emerges, and we've seen the kind of the focus of safety and security in payments and digital banking becoming paramount for consumers, and that's coming through strongly in the trends that we're seeing at an individual consumer level. And then finally, the emergence of AI. We kind of speak about AI at a technology level, but what we're seeing, interestingly, is manifest at a spending level as well, as the kind of the proliferation of AI services and other digital streaming services starts to become completely mainstream, ubiquitous across multiple areas of our lives. We're starting to see that coming through in spending behavior at a consumer level as well. It kind of talks to the ubiquity of AI and the kind of the e-commerce and digital landscape that we live in. So kind of at a very high level, a number of different trends that we're seeing playing out, and you'll see these really kind of frame a lot of the observations in the report. The report itself really focuses on a number of key themes, thematic trends that are playing out, and in addition to that, the kind of the granularity around consumer behavior. But to tell you a little bit more about the key observations and the high-level themes that we've seen, I'm going to hand over to Laneshri Moodley, Country Manager of Visa South Africa, and let her take you through the detail. Thanks so much, Laneshri.
Good morning, everyone. Firstly, thank you, Hilton. I'm again really very pleased to be here. As Hilton mentioned, this is the third launch of SpendTrends, and it really brings together unique data capabilities between Discovery Bank and Visa. I'm going to start this morning by first saying thank you to the teams at Discovery Bank and Visa for the dedication and really the effort that went into producing this very high quality, very informative report. And then obviously thank you to Hilton for his leadership and collaboration on this report. You know, from a Visa perspective, when we look at bringing digital payments into any country or into any ecosystem, we're constantly looking for ways to innovate and bring solutions and bring products that really remove the barriers and make people more connected and included into the digital financial ecosystem. And this is where data plays really a very pivotal role. Through data information, be it through the data we are seeing or by asking the voice of the customer, we're really able to get a good sense of what they're looking for, how their behaviors are changing, and you know what the expectations are. And you'll see all of that come together in the report and the insights that we will share today. So when I look at why we do this, we really want to inform the entire ecosystem of, you know, from banks to governments to fintechs to card schemes, exactly what is happening in the environment and how do we collaborate better together to really develop solutions that are relevant for the market that we operate in and that really meets the evolving customer needs that we see. So before I get into the high-level themes that I will take you through today, and there really are 4, I just want to give an overview of how we went about doing this report. Again, a significant data set actually informed a lot of the insights and the themes that we saw. Over 12 million credit cards between 2019 to 2024, representing over 2.6 billion transactions. When you look at the one side, it's data. On the other side, we actually commissioned research in market this year. We had over 1,000 customers that were surveyed to really look at their voice when it came to themes like how are they looking at cash, how are they looking at digital payments, how is AI playing a role in their daily lives, etc. And we will share some of the insights as we go through this today. And then the second thing we've done differently this year, we've added more South African cities into the actual report. So last year we focused on Johannesburg and Cape Town. This year we've added in Bloemfontein, we've added in Pretoria, we've added in Gqeberha. So as we go through this, we will give you a really good idea of how consumers are looking at spend and more than looking at spend, how they've actually been transacting and what they've been doing. The first trend we see is consumers are continuing to seek value from their purchases as macroeconomic conditions tighten. Hilton mentioned at the beginning the high interest rates that persisted, and we really started to see a little bit of a drop on the interest rates when it came to the last quarter of last year. And when we look back to 2023, 2023 data to do the report last year, what we saw was that consumers were turning to their credit cards, not just for the access that it offered them to credit, but really for the rewards and loyalty that it was bringing as they felt the macroeconomic conditions start to tighten. So some of the key things we've seen from the data, we've seen that despite inflation dropping last year, we've seen the spend per active card actually lag inflation by 5 percentage points. And I really want to qualify what that means as well. When you look at the market as a whole, we had a significant increase of credit cards, so people taking up more, and especially in the virtual space. As we start to talk about more digital interaction, virtual cards do provide an enhanced layer of security. So we had more cards, and so the total value that was being spent across a larger base was low. I think the second one I mentioned is that consumers are still seeking value from loyalty programs. We saw through Euromonitor research that 86% of South Africans are saying that they're feeling the cost and they're feeling the pressure of the rising costs. And of those who agreed with that statement, 41% said they actually shop more in places where there are loyalty programs or where there's certain memberships, etc., that they have. Very much like last year, when we look at where the spend was, majority of it was on groceries, retail, eating out, and travel. And made up about 70% of all of the transactions last year. And for this year, it's exactly the same. What is interesting to note that when you look at cities like Bloemfontein, East London, Gqeberha, they have a higher share of spend when it comes to non-discretionary items, like buying things like groceries and fuel, etc. Whereas when you look at Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Durban, you start to see a higher share of discretionary spend when you're looking at things like travel as well as eating out. And the other thing that we've seen is that travel spend actually slowed in the last year. When we look at it compared to the previous report, we sort of saw a 6% increase in SpendTrends 24, and this year this is sitting around 3%. The next trend is the rise of convenience and busier lifestyles. Again, Hilton mentioned this trend. More and more people are going back to work, and we've seen a lot more companies put policies in place in terms of return to work. And not just in South Africa. We're seeing this trend globally, and of course it's coming through here. We've also seen through one of the surveys done where they spoke to about 764 companies, more than 80% have said that they actually feel that by 2025 they will be back in office. So a couple of key data points here. We see that 27% of South Africans expect to increase their visits to restaurants, and 32% are saying that they order takeout at least once a week. When we go into the data view of this, online grocery shopping, we started to see an increase of this through the pandemic, and it's sort of accelerated. We now see that online shopping is growing at 15%, whereas face-to-face, going into the store, only grew by 6%. When you compare that to the previous report, it was 5 times bigger last year. This year, it's about 3 times bigger. And South Africans are leveraging digital platforms to do more than just order food. They're also ordering like meal kits so they can cook by themselves, making it more convenient, as well as ready-made meals, etc. And then, aligned back to the return to office, we have seen quite a significant increase when we look at the spend per average card on fuel. So 9% increase from what we saw the previous year. The next trend we see is, just move it. The next trend we see is digital payments, which continue to grow as customers find comfort in increased security. Again, I want to say with this, we saw an acceleration through the pandemic, and we've seen sustained growth when it comes to digital payments. And when you look at e-commerce and how that's particularly grown in our environment, I think trust, security, and convenience have all contributed to the explosion we've really seen on this. We did visa research, and it's called Visa Stay Secure, that it's done across multiple countries across the globe, including South Africa, and 76% of consumers say that they mostly and completely trust digital payments. This year, as part of the SpendTrends 25, I mentioned that we actually conducted the voice of the customer research in market. 67% of South Africans are saying they use cash very few times a month to not at all. And 84% of South Africans who use digital payments feel more secure making the online payments, especially when there's a two-factor authentication. So we've seen again through last year's data that the share of digital wallet purchases further increased by 9%. And interestingly, in the previous report, it was a similar percentage. And South Africans are saying, 68% of them through the Visa Stay Secure study, that they're expecting to use more digital payments in the next 12 months. I want to also talk about another study that we conducted in market called the value of acceptance, because on the one side, you are enabling the consumer to make digital payments. On the other side, you've got to enable the merchants to be able to take those payments. And when we did a survey to understand, perceptions, the needs around digital payments, we see that over 2/3 of all merchants surveyed said that they actually preferred card payments from a digital payment perspective. 60% of consumers in that survey said the same. We saw that over about 70% of merchants online now actually are starting to take digital payments. And then we've seen of all the SMEs that are, 80% of the SMEs that are taking digital payments have said that they've actually seen both increased revenue and footfall through their stores. So again, both sides of the ecosystem thriving from a digital payment perspective. And so we've got to protect this ecosystem, and we've got to continue innovating when it comes to products such as risk and fraud. The next part of this is talking about omni-channel experience or phygital experience. And what we're starting to see is things like, 40% of consumers are now ordering online, but then they go into the store to pick up their products. And then 60% of consumers are saying they check for things online, and then they go into the store to actually, or their nearest store to actually buy it. In South Africa, we're seeing 41% of consumers shop online, while 21% still prefer that phygital experience. I want to look, and also looking at the deals and the discounts and the loyalty, and then I'll go into the store and purchase what I want. And then following on from what we saw in SpendTrends 24, you can see that South African consumers are starting to shop a lot more on international platforms, Amazon being one of the examples. The last trend is South Africans taking up a wider range of subscription services. Last year, we saw a big take-up of subscription services. It was one of the biggest categories we saw in terms of growth, but a lot of it was actually related to subscriptions. This year, we've actually seen a lot of diversity in the spend. So we're seeing spend on online media, on AI, still groceries and e-commerce, and I'll give you some interesting insights that came out of the data. So the first one is we saw AI subscriptions. Previously, it made up about 8%, and that's increased significantly for 3 times compared to 2023. And then we've also seen online media that has increased its share quite significantly as well. E-commerce subscription, as you start to see the introduction, for example, Take a Lot More, you have Amazon in market, more and more people are starting to take subscription services from that as well. And then through the research that we ran, we saw that 62% of South Africans have 3 or more different streaming services that they use. And 29% of South Africans are willing to pay for a subscription service if they have discounts or exclusive offers related. Like some of the examples could be, I order something and I want it the next day, so I'm willing to pay a recurring subscription for it, or I want early access to things like Black Friday sales, as an example. I will wrap this up today with the last slide of, so why does all of this matter? All of the insights we've shared, the key themes we are sharing with all of you today, I'm going to cover it sort of across 4 points. The first one is consumer rewards. We're seeing that as the macroeconomic conditions tighten, consumers are looking more and more to loyalty programs and rewards, etc. And I think the way we construct value propositions really needs to talk to what consumers are wanting, and across different ecosystems of needs. So some of it could be around, like groceries or more everyday spend, where other ecosystem of needs could come across in travel. But we really need to understand what consumers are expecting and how their needs are evolving to take propositions to market that resonate. I think with the rise of convenience, we're going to see this trend a lot more as people come back into the office. So how do you then start to integrate some of these concepts or some of these components into the overall products and solutions that you're actually putting together for consumers? Digital payments driven by security. We are certainly seeing a thriving digital ecosystem in South Africa, and digital interaction is only going to increase. The one thing I will say here is we've seen from a Visa perspective globally, as you add digital payments into an environment, you actually lift the GDP of that country. So the more and more digital interactions increase, the more the responsibility is on all of us to actually come up with solutions that secure that ecosystem. From a Visa perspective, we've invested over $10 billion in the last 5 years on developing tools and solutions to actually secure the ecosystem, and leveraging also quite a lot of AI. In AI, we have invested about $3 billion over the last couple of years as well. So we see where things are going, and obviously we have to protect the payment ecosystem. And then the last one is the rise of subscriptions. We certainly see this continuing as more consumers start to spend online. I've mentioned on the previous slide, more and more consumers are using AI services, online media, etc. One of the key things we need to do is we need to look at how do you enable the consumer to understand where is their card on file across multiple merchants, etc., that they're putting it on, so that they can have a single view of where I'm making payments. If it's recurring, sometimes your children go and subscribe for games, and you want to have a view of, should I be stopping it, should I not? And so the Visa Subscription Manager is a good example of where it gives you a full view of where all of those transactions are happening, and you have the opportunity to stop those recurring payments as well. So again, I think that we have seen a tough macroeconomic environment, but certainly we have seen a resilience in the consumer spend. Of course, we've started to see some changes in where consumers are spending and how they're spending. But I am now going to hand over to Hilton to go into a bit more detail on the key insights from the report.
Thank you, Laneshri. So as you can see, SpendTrend is the most comprehensive analysis of spending in South Africa today. It covers over 2.6 billion individual transactions that form kind of the bedrock of the analysis, and so it gives the broadest view of spending at a thematic level. As you've seen from Laneshri, but it also allows us to go really deep in terms of the behaviours that we're observing amongst South Africans, and answer three key questions. Firstly, how much do people spend on an ongoing basis across the kind of the different ecosystems and across the card platforms? Secondly, what do they spend on at kind of an individual level, by segment, by cohort? And understanding the trends in that area, and then how they spend, the different channels and the mechanisms, and how that's influencing consumer behavior, and how we then interpret all three of these to really inform the products, the services, and the actual digital banking experience that we deliver to our customers. So looking firstly at the quantum of spend, as I think Laneshri said, the kind of the continued pressure that we've seen, or consumer strain that we've seen over the last few years as a result of a number of different factors, continued in 2024. And in fact, if you look at the average spend per card across the landscape, that was kind of almost entirely flat. In fact, slightly downward sloping over the year, with about a 5% differential between inflation and actual spend per card, reflecting the kind of the continued pressure on consumers. Despite the fact that we saw the interest rates start to decline at the end of the year and a continued reduction in inflation itself. What is interesting and informed by the kind of the behaviours that we see across the Discovery ecosystem is that consumers look to alternative forms of funding as well, in addition to credit, to really meet their day-to-day needs as well. And we saw it come through strongly in the third and fourth quarter through the two-pot withdrawal system, which came into the market, and enabled clients to access their retirement savings as an alternative form of liquidity and funding in 2024, creating kind of almost a discontinuity in terms of how clients were funding their liabilities. And so, our research showed that clients use the two-pot withdrawal system for some of their day-to-day costs, like their home and vehicles, but then also to settle short-term debt, kind of a good outcome of the system, and also to meet other costs like education, school fees, and daily expenses. And so we see kind of the supplementing of credit for liquidity through other channels in the study itself. In terms of where the spending occurred, we see kind of a number of different categories, but primarily in groceries, retail, travel, eating out, and fuel. Those make up 70% and continue to make up 70% of the spend across all the different cohorts that we include in the survey. And you can see in the analysis what we've done is by segmentation, from the mass market through to the high net worth segment, and then across the 7 cities that we've isolated and identified across the analysis. What we've really focused on is kind of the outliers and the areas of difference as well. So, for example, what you'll see is that groceries make up the highest proportion of spend almost across all cities, but in the case of Bloemfontein, it is the highest proportion overall. And conversely, Cape Townians have the highest proportion of their spend on travel out of all of the cities, and Joburgers exhibit the highest proportion on retail and eating out relative to other cities. So to be able to kind of from this year's survey actually compare and contrast the different behaviours, which are often a result of socioeconomic categories or differences in mix across the cities, but also the geographic landscape as well. Larger cities having access to often more outlets, more malls, restaurants, etc., and convenience playing a significant role as well. If you look at the kind of the detail around food spend in particular, we see a few very, very interesting insights coming through. The first is significant growth in eating out and takeout over the last year, and you can see 12% growth in the spend per active card in eating out and takeout, and a 1% growth in transaction size. The implication being that the increase in spend is really being driven by an increase in frequency. So people eating out more and more and accessing takeout at a much higher rate than they did in 2023. There was also an increase in grocery spend, once again reflected in the average frequency as opposed to average transaction size. So baskets are typically getting slightly smaller, but the shopping experience becoming more frequent, and that's driven by convenience. It's driven by choice in many instances, and it's a really interesting insight. What we've also done is indexed and benchmarked the average food spend per cardholder, per card across the various South African cities. And you can see that in Cape Town, for instance, we have the highest spend per card on groceries, whereas in Joburg we have the highest spend per card on eating out, just pipping the Cape Townians in that space. And in fact, the smallest differential between eating out and groceries occurring in Joburg, which is also an interesting insight, reflecting probably choice, convenience, and socioeconomic and social factors in larger cities that we observe, not just in South Africa, but I think globally as well. The shift that we've seen in spending behaviours, though, and habits, is incredibly marked in the area of online food spend. And it's occurred across all age groups, and importantly from a discovery perspective, not at the expense of healthy eating. So in fact, the opposite, we see that clients that are able to access some of the rapid delivery services from our network partners in particular are utilizing them to support their healthy eating habits. And what we've seen over the last year is a significant increase in online grocery spend as a percentage of the total. And you can see that's accelerated in particular in the 31 to 40 year old age band, where we've seen that online grocery spend is now 20% of total grocery spend. So kind of 1 in 5 rand being spent online with a view on convenience in the grocery space. What's also interesting is we tracked the changes in healthy food eating habits. And what you see is that baskets shift across the course of the week, with 40% of clients or 40% of baskets being healthy food at the start of the week, on kind of a Monday, and that shifts downwards to 29% of the basket by the end of the week, when people are kind of desperate for a sugar kick. And what's also interesting is that people tend to shop healthily when they shop online as well. So about 30% of online baskets are healthy relative to 27% of in-store. And our actuarial team attributes that to the fact that there's no kind of sweet aisle on the way out of an online basket. But it also talks to the fact that people are accessing fresh fruit and vegetables in smaller baskets, conveniently using the home delivery services as well, and kind of talks to a focus on fresh food and making it much more accessible for our clients, and the discounts in healthy food being prevalent and really promoting a more nutritious diet. So a really positive outcome that we've observed. As we've said, we are kind of emerging more and more into kind of a post-COVID environment, which looks more and more like the world pre-COVID in every sense, and it's marked by a return to travel, and that we observed over the last few SpendTrend reports, and that's continued. So while travel continues to increase, it's now leveling off at almost the kind of the pre-COVID levels. What is interesting is we see the value of the ecosystems that have been built up around travel, and this is an area that we focused on intensely within Discovery, and you can see it manifest in the fact that Discovery clients tend to spend about 20 to 25% more on travel than the rest of the population on their Discovery cards, and that's attributable to the fact that the ecosystem is incredibly valuable. We've had about 700 million rands worth of flight discounts that are translated or transferred back to our clients over 2024, and over 1 million bookings that took place on the platform, enabling travel. The other noticeable insight that we've seen is the effect of semigration on travel behaviours within South Africa, and it's most notable in some of the kind of the less obvious routes you would expect, the majority of flights, or the largest flight route, still remains your Joburg Cape Town route, which is one of the busiest in the world still today. But you start to see the emergence of routes like Joburg George and Cape Town George, which is becoming a more and more popular route. And so one of the most expensive flight on average that we see domestically across our base is in fact the George to Johannesburg route, and in particular that on a Sunday afternoon or Monday morning is one of the most booked routes that we see in amongst our client base, reflecting that immigration trend. What's also interesting is that the late night flights remain the cheapest time to fly, and in fact, the 8 p.m. or 7 to 8 p.m. slot on a Monday night is the cheapest flight to take between Joburg and Cape Town if you are looking to economize, and the Friday afternoon slot between 2 and 3 p.m. From Joburg to Cape Town is once again the most expensive, reflecting that the kind of the weekend travel that takes place on that route. From an international perspective, we continue to see the kind of the trends that we've observed over the last few years continue, with one noticeable exception being the reduction in travel over the last year between, on a relative basis, relative to 2023, between Joburg and Paris, where we saw the largest decline on the back of the fact that 2023 saw a spike as a result of the Rugby World Cup in travel on that route, reflecting the fact that South Africans travel for sport. We love the Springboks, and it actually comes through in the travel stats as well. What's also really interesting is the further people travel, the longer they stay. And so what we see is that the average duration of a trip to Mauritius is 9 days, the UAE 10, but then as you kind of go to the US and Australia, that stretches out to 17 days and 22 days respectively. And it also reflects the fact that more and more people are using our platform for leisure travel as well. So the kind of the international travel remains highly relevant on an outbound basis, but also for South Africans inbound, where travel where South Africa is more and more a destination for travelers and inbound travelers, and we see the kind of the top visitors continue to come from the UAE, the US, UK, Germany, and Canada, and about half of that to Cape Town itself directly, and about a quarter via Joburg, with the majority of spend taking place then, as you would expect, to accommodation, retail, eating out, and groceries, forming the bulk of the spend amongst inbound travellers. As we've said, the kind of the return to norm manifests in a number of areas, travel being one, but the other being the return to office. And as Lineshri said, more and more companies returning to work in office, and South Africa is very much aligned to that in terms of what we see playing out, using the data that we have within Discovery Bank and the kind of the card spend, combined with Discovery Insure and our telematics data. We're able to see exactly kind of how and where people are traveling and how far in the times. And you can see that the fuel spend has increased by 9% over the course of the last year. And in the case of Discovery Bank clients, we've by even more on average. And that reflects, we think, just the use of the Discovery Bank card on a higher relative basis as a result of the significant fuel rewards, and that continued focus on value by our clients as they become more and more conscious of the kind of the utilization of rewards, loyalty, and support of day-to-day spend. What we also see is that on average, our clients spend 35 hours per month in their cars over 2024, and you can just see the kind of the shift that's occurred back to kind of the normal travel behaviours across the landscape. From a spend channel perspective, and how people spend, the reliance on cash is certainly declining. It hasn't disappeared from the South African system, not by a long shot, but the rate of decline is accelerating as we see the emergence of real-time digital, incredibly low cost and frictionless payments start to become ubiquitous. And what's interesting is that the qualitative research which was conducted indicates that 2 out of 3 of the card holders that were surveyed in kind of really deep research indicate that they use cash only a few times to never at all every month. And so in kind of segments where cards are becoming more and more widely utilized and ubiquitous, we're seeing cash almost disappear out of the system. And initiatives and policy changes like PayShap really kind of drive and accelerate those changes, and where we saw over 100 billion rand transacted in essentially instantaneously, in real time, seamlessly across those rails at really low cost, representing 136 million transactions, and kind of supporting the digital payment ecosystems that have become so prevalent across South Africa. What's interesting is that there's still a perception that you kind of use cash for low cost or smaller value transactions, with 2/3 of transactions under 100 rand being preferred in cash, but then a very quick shift towards a digital payment for amounts greater than 100 rand, which are kind of, as you get to large payments of 10,000 rand or more, almost entirely digital at over 99% of transactions. But I think as consumers really start to appreciate the fact that even the lowest cost or the lowest value transactions are incredibly low cost on a digital platform, we'll start to see this shift very, very quickly as well. Part of the reason for the shift is obviously convenience in terms of the move towards digital payments, but more and more it's also reflected in increased security. Kind of the perception that carrying cash obviously has a risk, and digital payments are incredibly secure for both the merchant and for the client, and kind of the two coming together really quickly with it creates a really powerful low cost and secure ecosystem for clients, and so what we've seen is that across the board, while larger cities certainly had a kind of initially a more rapid digital wallet adoption rate across South Africa, we see the other smaller cities catching up very, very quickly with growth in excess of 30% in digital wallet average spend in cities like East London, Bloemfontein, Durban, and really kind of catching up to the early adoption rates that we saw in some of the larger cities. The emergence, as Laneshri said, of online e-commerce has also been one of the kind of the notable trends that we've observed in SpendTrend 25, but kind of brought together with physical in-store shopping as well. So what's interesting is that in the qualitative research that was conducted, over 90% of those surveyed that have a digital wallet or credit card indicated that they've actually shopped online over the last year, and over 80% of them, interestingly, indicate that they're going to increase that over the next year. So we definitely see this trend continuing. The card spend internationally has remained fairly stable, but what's interesting is that online has increased substantially, reflecting the fact that online platforms like Amazon internationally, Shein and Temu are being accessed by South Africans more and more for their shopping behaviours. The final area that I'm going to touch on is the area of subscriptions, and in particular the emergence of AI subscriptions and streaming subscriptions in general. have increased exponentially over the last 3 years since we started the SpendTrend analysis. Initially it was marked by kind of just an increasing take-up of streaming services by customers and increasing penetration of the market by some of the kind of the global platforms that we saw coming to South Africa. In this last year, we've seen the rapid emergence of AI subscription services, which has been a really kind of interesting insight, and within the Discovery Bank base, a kind of accelerated rate, even within that, where we've seen a 160% higher rate of adoption of AI subscription rates amongst our client base than the average across the survey. But in general, a very, very strong increase in AI subscription, being one of the kind of the notable standouts, and indicating, you know, that we talk about the impact of AI on back office services and the kind of the servicing and operational environments across organizations. But it's more and more a consumer service. It's being accessed by clients directly through their mobile devices, and is proliferating as a result. So you know, the trends around how people are spending, really reflecting the kind of the thematic trends that we've seen that frame the report. In particular, the fact that you know, the interest rates that we observed in 2024 continued sustained high interest rates, created real pressure on spend, but as we've emerged into 2025, we will hopefully see the effect of lower interest rates start to come through. The shift to digital real-time payments has really been one of the kind of the standout observations, and the fact that 2 out of 3 South Africans today see their world as almost being entirely cashless is one of the trends that we see continuing to accelerate. The post-COVID environment, marked by a significant increase in international travel over the last 3 years, now continues in daily behavior in terms of return to work and the travel, the kind of travel trends that we see, and a significant focus on security of digital transactions, which requires an investment on both the part of the issuer, the digital bank, and consumers in terms of the kind of the way that they manage their digital finances, which becomes critically important at a consumer level. And then finally, the proliferation and diversification of digital subscription services, as we see consumers really kind of expand the services that they're accessing from an e-commerce perspective. This being the kind of the fastest growing area of consumer spending. So as we kind of think about 2025 and what we expect for the balance of this year, having seen a lot of the kind of the trends that we observed over the last 3 SpendTrend reports, we continue to see the kind of the acceleration of these trends in a number of areas. AI certainly we expect to really inform how consumers don't just kind of access information, but how it then informs their purchasing behaviours, and the emergence of AI agents in terms of shopping and spending patterns is an incredibly exciting trend that we think will really kind of drive the way that clients bring the two worlds together in terms of spend and AI. The continued acceleration of digital payments, the kind of the policy environment supports this, the merchant value that it creates supports this, and the banks themselves, and in particular the way we think about Discovery Bank and the products that we offer to our clients, making them more secure, making them frictionless, and giving clients much more control of their digital banking, makes it a much better experience for them. So we think that will accelerate. The continued kind of geopolitical and kind of economic volatility and uncertainty that we saw at the end of 2024, we expect to continue, and therefore that will frame, we think, a lot of the consumer behaviours in terms of seeking out value, continuing to really focus on kind of the value propositions, the use of loyalty programs, the use of rewards as a mechanism really to make spending more affordable. We think will also be a kind of a defining characteristic of the 2025 year. And then finally, this continued return to norm. As remote work continues to reduce, the opportunity to kind of balance cost and convenience becomes even more important. So e-commerce, shopping online, a phygital experience becomes absolutely crucial. So we will see how it plays out, but we see a kind of a increasingly digital and increasingly exciting world, and we look forward to reporting back to you on that. So just from our side, before we take questions, I invite Leslie up here to take questions with me. Just a massive thank you to both the Discovery team and the Visa team that's really been focused on driving these insights. As I said, this is the most comprehensive view of spending among South Africans in terms of both its sort of breadth and depth, and we really do value the collaboration and the opportunity to share this with you every single year. So Nesri, on that note, please why don't you join me up here. Thank you very much. Don't know if there are any questions. I'm happy. Nesri's happy to take them.
Hello, I am Anati from MoneyWeb, and I just have two questions. I just want to know how many people bank with Discovery Bank, because I think with this report you said that you surveyed over 100,000 people. So if you could just give me that number.
Yeah. So Discovery Bank has just over 1.1 million clients.
Okay.
The number of clients surveyed was 1,000 clients, but they weren't Discovery Bank. The survey was deep. It was fairly comprehensive, but it was 1,000 South Africans representing a broad kind of cross section of cardholders.
Correct. So it was 1,000 customers, and they could have banking relationship with any number of banks in South Africa. So that was the voice of the customer.
Okay.
And then as we went deeper into data insights and obviously discovery data.
Oh, okay, because I think then my second question doesn't apply, but I was just going to ask, are you looking to sort of like compete in the lower income segment? Because I do have a sense that, these insights show us a different type of market.
So what's interesting is, and Nisha can add, I think the survey covers 4 segments, from high net worth, which is the top 5% of spenders, through to the mass market segment, and today, if we look at the Discovery base, but I think and Nisha can talk to the Visa base, the kind of the accessibility of digital banking is incredibly broad, and covers a very, very broad cross-section of South Africans, both by kind of geography and socioeconomic status. And in fact, if you look at the Discovery base today, our digital banking accounts start at a pay-as-you-transact level. You can start at a very, very low monthly fee, and so we don't see it as necessarily segment specific. On the contrary, today we see our client base covering a very, very broad cross-section of South Africans.
Yeah. Okay, I think just to add to what Hilton had said, certainly from a Visa perspective, we work with partners, clients across the ecosystem, and we want to enable digital payments for everyone. I think I mentioned up front, for us, we know when you add digital payments into any country, you actually have the opportunity to lift the GDP. And so we focus on all the segments. And at the core of that is also a financial education in terms of ensuring that people understand there is safety in using digital payments. And so we come up with solutions absolutely across the multiple segments.
Alexander?
Yeah, quick question. So the one segment that had grown a little bit was the sporting booking. And I just want to see what the definition of that is. I'm assuming it's not hospitality at Ellis Park.
No, so it you know, I think in our case, and we did that used Discovery data. We've got a early access benefit for live sporting events and also for music events. So we've seen as we've seen a lot more live events in South Africa. We've seen a significant increase in that category. There's also, from an e-commerce perspective, increase in terms of sports betting and gaming and entertainment that has taken place. But the category I think that you're referring to is actually more around eventing itself, and we have a significantly disproportionate share of that coming through Discovery Bank clients because of the early access that we provide to those events.
Hi, Hilton. It's Stephen Cranston. I just wanted to, financial analyst, in terms of the destinations, is that final destination or is that the first destination? And, for example, the UAE, I mean, a lot of that would be transit flights, wouldn't it?
Inbound, are you referring to?
Inbound
I think this is the outbound one. Yes, the inbound is hugely at the UAE, isn't it? Would that just be people coming on Emirates and who aren't necessarily from UAE?
Yeah, so when we look at the outbound, it's the flights that we can see that consumers are using their credit card here, where they're flying into and then ultimately out as well. So those are how we look at the corridors.
For inbound, what's interesting is the visa data that we use for that is based on the issuing bank. So it's actually it's not the kind of the last point of the journey. It would actually be an American, if it's indicated as USA, it would be a USA bank, that card that's being used in South Africa. So it really does reflect the kind of the point of departure. Yeah. Okay. On that note, I just want to thank everybody on behalf of Visa as well, to thank Visa and to thank you on behalf of Discovery and Visa for joining us here this morning. We really appreciate the partnership and the collaboration, and to be able to share spend trends with you. We're available after the session for any questions directly. Thank you very much, everyone.